My name is Ingrid Brubaker. I am a journalist, and right now I'm working as the editor of Empirics.no, which is a Norwegian online magazine about comics. It's been up since last year, so it's fairly new, but pretty good. I've worked with the Oslo Comics Expo for 9 years now, and at Citytech I worked for about 5 years, on and off. And in this presentation, I'll be talking mostly about the Citytech, but also how they serve the community with comics in regards to children and schools and stuff like that. And a tiny bit about the Norwegian comics scene in general, just to give you a big picture of it. So Citytech is a special branch of the Municipal Library in Oslo. It's located on the second floor of a regular library. And the whole collection is around 10,000 comic books, or at least that's what we've said the last few years. So at this point, I think there are more. Yeah, this is a picture from it. We have shelves going all around the room. The room is way too small for the whole collection at this point. And when I quit my job there in June, this was one of the last things that I got done. Meaning I ordered the shelf, I didn't make it myself, but we put up the collection of tiny scenes and books that we bought throughout the years, and we made a new genre called small print. So we have lots of like art students and independent comic artists. We take it in and we put it in our collection and we display it on this massive shelf. Citytech arranges festivals and launches and events throughout the year. I'll be going through different ones on the other slides. And we also organize class tours, meaning schools can book appointments with one of the people working there. And they come in and they get a tour around, and we talk about different comics and stuff like that. I'm also getting back to that later. And workshops for kids and some for adults. There's a lot going on there. Our biggest event, I think, is the Oslo Comics Expo, which is arranged now next year for the 10th time. It's an annual comics festival where people come in to participate in panels and debates and interviews. Both Norwegian and international artists come in for that. We also have a big marketplace, which is what I've been organizing throughout the years. It's out in front of the library. The whole festival is arranged at the library, which makes the library a big part of it. And we also, the last few years at least, we've had an international publisher come in as one of our main guests, which is good for Norwegian readers to learn about international comics, but also the international publishers learn about Norwegian artists that they might not have heard of before. Then there's Seriefest, which is also an annual festival, but it's pretty new. It's arranged for the third time this year, in November actually. It's a weekend-long festival where the first day is a seminar for teachers and librarians, and just people interested in how to convey comics to kids and how to get people to read and how to use comics in education, stuff like that, depending a bit on whoever speaks, but there's a seminar first. And then over the weekend, there are workshops for kids and interviews with artists for kids and just possibilities to draw everywhere just so kids can get into comics. Because one of the main points for this festival was that comics as a genre has moved on from being just for kids, which is a cliche, to being just for adults, is what they thought. So they wanted to bring the focus back and make comics interesting for kids. Which is good, I think, because pretty much all kids like to draw. Then there's Talentrytters, which means talents and markers. It's a workshop for youths where they come in once a week for about 7 or 8 weeks to Citytech at night, and a local artist will be their teacher. And last year it was Sigbjørn Lilling who drew this. And he takes them through a workshop with different techniques and different storytelling techniques and stuff like that. And at the end, they have a magazine that they print, and then they have a launch party. it's pretty good actually. Quite a few interesting, very young talents out there that we've seen. Then there's the class tours. I used to do some of these this spring, and it's really interesting because you have classes come in, and like with all classes, I guess you have a lot of students who read all the time and they know everything you tell them from before, but then you have all the other kids who don't know anything and they think that Donald Duck is the only comic book around, and when you show the whole library to them, they're just like, ooh, which is really inspiring. So usually what we do, we want to make them realize what pleasures lie in reading, basically. So I show them around the room and just show them the different genres, and you know, everyone likes, or you find someone who likes superheroes and someone who likes Calvin and Hobbes. And everyone likes different things. So basically what I do is just talk to them about it, and I ask them what are comics, and we try to define what comics are. Surprise, it's pretty much everything. They usually say it's drawings with words, which is correct, but it's also not everything. And we also have different, like we have small kids come in, but also a few older kids, and we had some special classes. I had one class of kids who had hard of hearing, which was really interesting because I had to speak really slowly, and we all really focused on what they could see, the visual part of comics, which I thought was really interesting. There's nothing real. It's not really organized any other way than classes just email us and we say come in whenever you want, pretty much. It's really popular. Yeah, I just thought I'd go through some of the Norwegian publishing houses. This is one of the bigger ones called No Comprendo Press. They do quite a few translations, like the Olivier Schrauen, and they publish Norwegian ones too. That's Anna Fisk and Christian Drog Sørensen. I don't know if you've seen them before, but this book was really popular this spring. It's pretty good. Then there's Jippe Forlag. These are all by Norwegian artists. Anja Dale Øverby, Shooting Young, and Jens Kostyve. Then there's Iber Press. They publish various things, but they also have this anthology that, in my opinion, started out kind of not great, but at this point it's become really good. This is the last... Yeah, I think this one is the most current one. And it's really cool. It's a very good place for new artists to come in and show what they can do. Yeah, I just thought I'd go through some of the festivals in Norway too. There's the Oslo Comics Expo that I told you about. This is the poster from last year when I was one of the main organizers, and this is the best poster we've ever had in my opinion, so I'm very happy with that. Then there's the Raktis Festival in Bergen, in the west part of Norway. That was arranged this year for the 20th time, so that's an older festival. Stribefeber is down south. That's a school where they have special study line for people who want to make comics. They also have their own festival. And I thought it was interesting to see how there are festivals basically in every part, north, south, west, and east. Oh, that was fast. Yeah, okay, any questions? No questions. Yes, go for it.
Can you tell more about the Uber Press? Since they seem to be having some sort of anthology.
Yes, that's their
magazine going on.
Yes.
Do you know if they accept people out of Norway?
No, I don't know that actually.
They have considered it.
Okay.
I know foreign artists that have tried,
okay.
But I don't know why they didn't go.
No, it seems
but then
to me
they live in Norway. So.
Yeah, it seems to me that they focus on local artists. I saw their I went to Raktis in Bergen for about a month ago, and I saw their panel, and they've had some really interesting collaborations where they've read a story and they've found another illustrator to draw it and stuff like that. It's pretty cool. And they have a different theme per anthology. So this was apocalypse, and they've had science fiction and western stuff like that. But you said the foreign artists live in Norway.
They also have these exclusive published books,
Yeah,
like
that's true.
Fantastic Man and Song.
Yeah.
And other stuff.
Yeah, so it's a pretty big publishing house on the west coast. Any other questions?
Do you know, do the other libraries have comics departments, or is this unique?
No, I mean, Citytech is the only main library for comics, but in Norway we have this thing called inköpsordningen, which means libraries have to buy a certain amount of comics, which was pretty new a few years ago, I think.
Our local library always had 2 comic sections.
Okay.
One for adults and one for children.
But now they have to. Now they have to buy in a certain amount of comics.
Yeah.
They didn't used to do that before. Most libraries, I would think, have at least some comic books. And there's, I think in Stavanger, also on the west coast, they have a pretty extensive collection. And it's Tromsø is your library.
No, Mo i Rana.
We don't know. Okay.
Yeah. That's part of the national library.
Oh yeah, that's true. But yeah, most libraries tend to have at least some comics. I think.
Do we have guests from Oulu library? Yes. What kind of comics department do you have?
Well, I would say a pretty good one. Yes. We try to make it really diverse, that there is a lot of diversity from small presses and from the bigger ones. Of course, we have to think about our customers, what they want to loan, but we tend to have different kinds of comics in our collection.
Can I say something about that? Because I found it really interesting working in the Citytech, because that's on the second floor of a regular library. And we have so many people come up just kind of looking around and they've never heard of it before, and they only think that comics is Donald Duck, for example, or the newspaper strips. And then we're able to show them everything that comics can be, which I think is like one of my favorite parts of working there was that. So I think, like, I agree, people should loan what they want, but I do think that a lot of people would enjoy comics. They just don't know it yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you had a huge selection, or if they had a big space for comics, people would be interested, even though they didn't think they were interested.
Yeah.
Because they don't know about it. But do you
them all in the
Sometimes we have problems though, because we have books that could be in both, or could be in, like the Hugo Cabret books, or book. That one was tough because we have it in the library because it's a novel. graphic novel. But sometimes you have problems.
Thanks for inviting me here. It's been a very interesting and enjoyable experience. And happy to be in the city of Oulu. Now, so basically, Iceland doesn't have all that much of a comic scene, and it's a bit overwhelming to be Ingrid talking about these publishers, publishing houses. We have one tiny publishing house that focuses on comics, but they hardly publish any Icelandic comics. So, but in the past decade, and particularly in the past 5 years, there's been a sort of small boom of comics in Iceland. Now, to try to give you a bit of a feeling for history, I mean, there hasn't been any proper research done into the history of Icelandic comics. It is, when people are writing overviews, it is always popular to start with, in the manner of Scott MacLeod, ancient history, the manuscripts of the Middle Ages. Icelanders have this collection of manuscripts, many of them beautifully illuminated, even though that is hardly ever talked about when people talk about the manuscripts. They always just talk about the sagas. We are a very literary nation that way. This is, for example, a Bible translation, and clearly intended for as a help for those who couldn't read well, because it's the story of Abraham and Isaac, and then it's, you know, told in pictures as well. So, I mean, another example is the Book of Drawings, which is basically a kind of a manual from the 14th century, a sort of how to draw manga for the Middle Ages. It was basically a manual for illuminations, but it also has some narratives. Again, Bible stories were the most popular. Now, obviously, examples like this tell us nothing at all about comics, but what they tell us is that we've always been telling stories in pictures, and I think that is important to keep in mind. Especially in Iceland, where we have such a small tradition, it's good to remind people that we have actually been doing this for a while. Now, back to modern times. This is a cartoon by Hugleikur Dagsson, who is our biggest comic artist in Iceland today, and has been, I think, instrumental in getting more young people to read and then draw comics. And to give you an indication of how small the Icelandic comic scene is, he is my little brother. And he draws these stick figures and has published oceans of books of those. But he doesn't come from nowhere. Just like everywhere else, Icelanders got an influx of American comics during the Second World War. And since then, there have been, we've had a number of comics in English and in Danish. I mean, we were a Danish colony. We've always had a very close relationship with Denmark. So Danish comics, or what was translated into Danish and into Danish magazines, were quite important for our sense for comics. And then the occasional person started doing comics. Not many, but I mean, there was one and one. The best known example, a strip called Sigga Vigga, which is basically a female name, by Gísli Ástþórsson. He was a journalist and a writer as well as an artist, and he published this strip for over 2 decades. Although not quite continuously, he started in 1959. And this is a story about, this is the main character, this is Sigga Vigga. And this is a very political story in tune with the times. She and her friend that's getting wrapped up in that contraption there. They work in a fish factory, so this is very much about class struggle. And here we see an example of that. She's standing there like she's standing in the middle of the party. Turns out she's standing outside. Strangely enough, the author wound up working for the most conservative newspaper in Iceland, continuously doing these comics for that. Anyway, it's then in the 80s that various comic-related things start to happen. You could say that the next big event, and really the event that started modern comics, or the scene that's happening today, is the publishing of the comics magazine called Gisp. And here you see the covers and the cover of the, I think, 13th issue. And it's in its 14th issue, I think, today, so they haven't even managed to publish an issue a year, even though they started out with high hopes of 4 issues a year. And many of its contributors are visual artists, such as Kári Hringsson and Jóhann Torfason, other graphic designers and illustrators, such as Bjarni Hinriksson and Halldór Baldur. Bjarni Hinriksson is the main instigator behind all this, and he has also been the most active of them in that is doing comics, publishing graphic novels. Here are 2 examples. This is a collection of short stories, and this is a sort of semi-autobiographic graphic novel about how to become a comic artist. And here are pages from these books. Bjarni works a lot with computers and scans and photographs that he then plays with. Halldór Baldursson is probably with Hugleikur the best known comic artist today, but for his political cartoons rather than comics. And he's made quite a career for himself in that. Here we have our ever presentable president sending a nice little message to Europe. And then Iceland follows that up. This is obviously done during the eruptions. We had these 2 volcanic eruptions that amused people all over the world. A year before GISP, in 1989, that is, Þórir Hilmarsson, together with writer Sjón, published a graphic novel called 1937, Ævintýri Tinnu og Hreins Borgfjörðs, The Adventure of Tinna and Hrein Borgfjörð. And he's clearly influenced and has never tried to deny that he's heavily influenced by Tintin. And this, even though there was a graphic novel that had been published before, this was the sort of first serious attempt at making a graphic novel. It wasn't very long, but still sort of. And Þórir himself, he doesn't really like it when I show these. He says this is old stuff, putting this behind me. But I quite like the way that it's, a bit primitive, nicely primitive. Þórir is also a very successful painter. Comic artists in Iceland have to have another career. And he's doing these really romantic landscapes alongside his very existentialist comics. Now, GISP, and the reference is Danish. Again, so much of our comics experience is from or via Denmark. GISP is a Donald Duck exclamation. And Donald Duck was only available in Iceland for many years. And in fact, Donald Duck was the only thing that made Icelandic kids want to learn Danish. Since it has been translated into Icelandic, Danish has really collapsed. So GISP was the first attempt to create something of a comic market and get a regular thing going. And then the next thing is this magazine here, Blek or Ink, that then turned its name into Neo Blek or Neo Ink, starting in 1996, and is still being published, but very much under the general radar. It's really just a small. It's slightly higher than those fanzines. It's really not much, doesn't get much more of a circulation, even though it's looking very slick and professional today. And it's published by a French Icelandic comic artist, Sján Bosok, who's also has the only comics publishing house. His comics are very much in the European tradition, classic European tradition, and he was actively criticizing the GISP people for being too arty and thus not able to get to the common people well enough. And then he suddenly turned around and published this really arty comic or graphic novel himself. So since then, he hasn't been able to criticize anyone. This is a page from the first book. It is available in English, but I couldn't find the couldn't find it in English at my library, so it's just the Icelandic version here. It's sort of short sketches about the Icelandic Julelads. We have this wonderful Icelandic Christmas tradition where our Santa Claus does not visit to give gifts, he comes to steal. And he is many, he's either 7 or 13, depending on which version of the folktale you prefer. And these Santa Clauses, their mother is Grýla, who features in this page here. And she eats unruly children, especially around Christmas, but all year around really. So, so he's together with another writer, Sigrún Edda, is having a lot of fun with this Icelandic Christmas tradition. The Finns also have something weird to do with Santa Claus. I saw this wonderful Finnish horror movie about a Santa Claus that shocked people to pieces. Ours are not quite that bad apart from Grýla, obviously. Now, Skuggi Rökkva, or the Shadow of Rökkvi, is a very dramatic story about this guy, Rökkvi, who goes through a horrible experience and emerges as a superhero. You can see the little cape, but obviously quite on the dark side still. Now, another artist who works also in the classic European tradition is Ingi Jensson. He's been working quite a lot with Jan Posok and publishing in Neoblek. He has never published a book, even though he is probably one of our most prolific comic artists. He's been publishing in various magazines, and now he lives in England, in the same town as Ridley Scott is from. He says it looks just like Blade Runner. And is teaching comics and also doing illustrations. And here is a lovely little story about when he and his family were on a holiday and they found wasps in the room. Now, these magazines, even though they never became sort of hugely popular or spread widely or anything like that, they at least created some sort of a foundation. At least something was being done, something was happening. And in fact, in Blek, both Hugleikur and Lóa published, well, Hugleikur not quite his first, but Lóa her first comic. So at least this was some sort of a platform. And then things start to, and here's another picture by Ingi, obviously influenced by his Blade Runner landscape. And then it's in the new millennium that comics have become visible in Iceland. And there are various factors to that, and one is Hugleikur Dagsson. This is his first book called Elskið okkur or Love Us. A very primitive publication. It was self-published, basically just photographed pages that he cut in half and then stapled and glued. And sold this for not much money. And most of his work is in this style. It's a one picture thing. Usually some sort of a basic pun. Quite often rather dark. And of course, according to many comics experts, this is not comics at all because it's not sequential, it's just one frame. He even created an Icelandic word for it, einrömmungar, which is impossible to translate. So this was, this started out, he always tells this story, so I'll just do that as well. This started out quite accidentally. He was graduating from the Arts Academy, and they were supposed to put up an exhibition. And he had a few pictures that he wasn't really all that happy with. But he had to fill up the space somehow. So he just sat down an hour before the exhibition opened and drew a collection of these. And they became a hit immediately. And then he exhibited them again and finally published in this first book. And the rest is Icelandic history. Now, yeah, here's another one. He's also done more sort of traditional-ish graphic novels. This is my favorite, and I think that at least to date this is his best work. It's called Åpenbæren, or Revelation, and it's based on the book of Revelations. And the idea behind this work is that, as you know, humans are sending capsules with material about information about humanity into space. And because all humanity is basically Christian, the Bible is among these informations. So the idea behind the story, or in the story, is that aliens get this book, this Bible, and they read it and they think it's fiction. And they're particularly taken with the book of Revelation with all its monsters. So they decide to stage it on Earth live, with, you know, obviously lots of people dying. So here is the director. He's saying action for the whole opera to start, and it's I think it's basically I think it's one of his best, if not his best work. This was a first in a series of doomsday graphic novels that he's been working on, and now with other artists. Number 2 is a zombie plague. Number 3 is a upside down world's end, where everything is, you know, topsy-turvy. And this is about to be published now, called Mother. And he's collaborating with various artists who, at least some of them, have been making, well, no, none of them has really been making a name for themselves, but I think they all can, and I think they all will. Now, and Hulekur comes from the visual arts scene. I mean, he graduated from the Arts Academy, where he had a continual existential crisis due to the fact that he was unsure about what kind of an artist he was, but then he finally found out with these small drawings, and he regularly produces these cute little artworks. This is God, for example, another favorite. Now, in 2003, a year after Hulekur, this series started and was published in 4 books. And this was an attempt, this was, you know, totally different from Hulekur as possible. This was an attempt to create mainstream comics based on the sagas. This is based on Njála, or the saga of Burnt Njál. As a comic, it's, well, I mean, it's okay, but it's not particularly impressive, and it didn't really manage to catch on. Although it's hugely popular, obviously, by kids and teenagers that have to read the bloody book and prefer the comics. So this is an excellent example of the educational packet that has been seen here. And the only proper, well, I mean, you could say that Hulekur's Book of Revelation is educational in its way, but this is the more sort of pointed. what I like about the work is that they take this saga and they start at the end and then they move backwards. It's not like Memento, but almost. And it's, I think that was an interesting technique. Now, following upon this, comics started to happen. Lóa Hjálmtýsdóttir, who was also becoming quite well known, she started doing comics in newspapers in 2005. And again, very small comic scene. She is a childhood friend of Hugleikur. And he briefly formed his own publishing house and published her book. But then he gave up on that. It was too much work, not enough fun. But this book was, I think, originally published in 2011, something like that. In Icelandic, Alhæft Þjóðir, and then in English. And Lóa is a singer in a very popular band, so she travels a lot around the world with that band. And, you know, they're always staying for a short while in every country. So they started saying these stupid jokes, generalizations about nations, and then she turned that into a comic. And you see the Finnish here. Can you read the text there? Finnish men find it very uncomfortable when they run into their acquaintances. On the street would be the Icelandic text. But, yeah. And then the Americans are particularly like those. And she has since published 2 books, one of them just now, and this one last year. And this is a strip that's not from that book, but in the same style. She also does regular strips for an English newspaper called Grapevine. And she is very much talking to women readers, which is in our tiny comic book scene a new thing. Now, an interesting sort of sideline in Icelandic comics is this guy here, Kristján Jón Guðnason, who's a naive artist and published his first comic, a graphic novel called Óhugnanleg Pláneta, or Eerie Planet, in 1992. But it isn't until this new wave starts going that he starts publishing again, and has published 7 books since 2007. And here we have 3 of those, and here I put an example of his art. He's also very popular artist, and he has a lot of pictures in our Architect in the Reykjavík City Library, and they fly fast. 2 new graphic novels, and again I stress how important Hugleikur has been to the young generation. Certainly comics were visible, they were happening, they were possible. So 2014, 2 graphic novels. This was in 2012, and then there was another one in 2014. This is basically called Vampire, by a young couple called Siri and Smári. And again, very small scene. They both graduated from the Arts Academy and both wrote their final dissertation under my supervision. And Lóa did as well, actually. I forgot about that. So I mean, these are all my students. These are all people that I have been somehow, working with in various ways. Because I'm the person to go if you're interested in if you're interested in comics in Iceland. So this is a very nice little story about a girl who thinks that she's maybe a vampire. 2 years later, 2 sisters, Elisabeth Rún and Elín Edda, published this graphic novel, Plantan á ganginum, or The Plant in the Hallway. And both of these young artists, all of these young artists, they've been using the internet extensively. This started out as an internet comic, and then they decided to publish it. And Silja and Smári have also been using the internet quite a lot, and Loa has also done so. And this is a story about middle-aged people, neighbors, who get very much on each other's nerves at first, but then eventually become good friends. And I find it a very sort of interesting topic for two. Well, the younger sister was 18 when they started doing this, and the older was 19. So, interesting subject. And then just some more examples. This is Sunna Sigurðardóttir. She appeared on the scene when she published comics in a novel, an award-winning novel. There's two narratives, and one is in comics. This was, totally unprecedented in Iceland, and but worked really well. And she has been doing illustrations and comics since, and she will be opening an exhibition in my comics department next week. Another, also student of mine, is Þórey Mjallhvít. She's not published anything yet apart from illustrations, but she's been working on this apocalyptic comic for some, and this is a nice global warming, and when the glaciers started melting, all the monsters that were frozen in them are running loose. And there's also something to do with spells and magic in it. So here we have folkloric monsters attacking and eating people. Now, I've been talking about the influence and importance of hugleikur, but it must also be remembered that there have been other factors helping out. This bookshop here, Nexus, run by this friendly-looking guy there, opened up in 1992 and very quietly became quite a large thing, and very much a center for comic nerds today. And then in 2000, my library opened a comics department that I have been running ever since. And soon other libraries followed course. All the libraries are working closely with Nexus, and both partners gaining a lot. I mean, Nexus sells obviously quite a lot of books by selling them to libraries. And then the libraries send their clients to Nexus when they're looking for material that we don't want to have as a part of our collection. We are very prim being a public library, so porn and the really graphic novels we tend to stay clear of. Now, these two things, the other and have made comics basically visible and accessible, which was not the case before. So it's only, you can see, it's really only 15 years that we've had as any kind of attempt to build up a comic scene. And the department, this is the main branch, and we have the biggest department. It's not quite as big as the Seriótekið, but I think we have around 5,000 books. Now, we started doing a comics competition in 2009. We had done one before, but in 2009 we decided to do it annually. And it's for people between 10 and 20. And we do it together with the Visual School of Arts and Nexus, of course. We don't do anything without Nexus. And here you see a sort of various collection, obviously, with tends to be a bit of all kinds of everything. Here you have manga, and here a sort of photographic, very basic thing. And heroes. This is Wonder Woman. The theme, we have a theme each year based on the birthday of a comic character. And this is Elín Edda Þorsteinsdóttir, who won the 2011 competition. And she is one of the authors of The Plant in the Hallway. So it all is sort of, coming around nicely. And this is a part of another slideshow that is obviously moving on its own. So here's my comics department. And last year I decided to do exhibitions there. I've been wanting to do that for a long time because Icelandic comics are very much underrepresented in Icelandic culture. So I wanted to draw our readers' attention to the fact that Icelanders do comics. And the simplest thing to do that is to mount comics on the shelves. So that's what I did. And strangely enough, this has become quite successful. I was a bit worried that it would all get a bit too crowded and crummy and annoying, but that has not been the case. It's been quite popular. So, yeah, so here you see the various attempts. Jan Posok, the publisher, he chose to approach the space as kind of an advertising space for his publishing house, which is fair enough. I just tell people this is just shelves and walls between shelves, and you can do whatever you want with it. Most sort of print out A3 posters. Bjarni Hinriksson took his book, chopped up the Hjörlein, and then basically mapped it all. You could sort of read all the book in one corner. Sivy and Smári used the wall as a page, cutting out the frames. Jan Posok again published, put his whole book, Skuggirakva, on one page and then with sketches as well. Halldór Baldursson turned the space into something of an atelier, basically taking all of his sketches for everything he's doing and randomly pasting it back all over the place. And The Plant on the Hallway, again, the whole book, you could just read yourself through the comics department. And here is Ingi Jensson, who did a collage of his various things. Noah was much more minimalistic in her approach. And then I made them do the posters for the exhibitions, and that has turned out really well. We're going to have an exhibition of posters at some stage. And it also shows how different the Icelandic comics are. I mean, these are all people coming from very different backgrounds and interests. And this is what I get for my efforts. This is Halldór Baldursson's drawing of me, and this is Jan Posok's, and then here is Hugleikur's self-portrait. This was the guest book for Ingi Jensson's opening. Yeah, so I'm all done. We have questions or comments?
Did you bring any of these books?
No.
Okay.
Too much luggage and too far to go. I thought about it, but the plant on the hallway you can read online. I think it's all there still, and also in an English translation. Just Google plant on the hall or in the hallway. Syrian Smauri, they also have a page on Facebook. And they also have actually, I think, a website that is they used to have. Hugleikur, it's easy to find. Loa has a Loa Moratorium on Facebook. I mean, there are various. Didn't I send you the?
Yes.
Yeah.
List.
Yeah. Also, you can just write to me and I can send it to you. There's at least, a portion of this online. Christian Jón Guðnason is not online. He doesn't have an email and, he's very anti-technological. So his work is the only stuff. It was really difficult for me to find even just the covers for his work.
Is there Icelandic comics festival or plans to have one?
There are some vague plans of trying to do something along those lines. It's obviously not going to be just Icelandic comics, but Nexus has turned the free comic book day into a bit of a comics festival, where you have, the costumes and the whole thing. And I know that there is this guy who's actually living and working in Denmark who is interested to try and create some sort of a Comic Con in Iceland. He's contacted me, but I haven't found the time to figure out what he's going to do and how I can fit into it. But I mean, I think it would be a great thing to try and start something, and I think it would be a good thing to continue the Oulu work and maybe try to continue this Arctic thing and Nordic thing and take that into Iceland to start with. I think an international is going to be a bit strange. Also, it's so horrendously expensive to go to that last time.
I was kind of follow-up question, I guess, because I was thinking like, what's your dreams or what's your plans for the future? What do you hope to do? Are you planning something with the comics in Iceland?
Well, I would like to continue this work that I have been doing by raising the profile of Icelandic comics. So I have plans, although not the time, to do more research into the history of Icelandic comics and try to do a big exhibition that would be a historical overview. I want to do it with the History Museum and the Arts Museum. And I have contacted everyone and I've, aired this idea. Everybody thinks it's wonderful and great, and yes, please do it. But time and money aren't available. So I don't know. I was thinking about 2017, but the way things are going now, that's not going to happen. So I'm vaguely thinking about 2018. But the wonderful thing with this stuff here, which was really just a crazy idea of mine. Nobody thought this would work. My bosses, I didn't even tell them about it. I just did it. And then when they came, very obediently to the opening and looked around, and they said, gee, I would never have thought this would work so well. And because librarians, even though we tend to have lots of posters, usually homemade, and this sort of, librarians don't really like all that much of a mess on their bookshelves and between them. So I was really worried that this would irritate people. But it hasn't, quite the contrary. Everybody has been really pleased with it. It's getting more and more media exposure. I've got the next 2 years fully booked, which I thought that I could do this maximum for 2 years. It's gonna be a neat exercise, but that's probably dead. So, so I think that I can try to follow up on this and do a bigger exhibition. And of course, I have been working with GISP once on a Nordic and semi-international exhibition, and I know Bjarni wants to have more of that. So that's, I think that as things stand, exhibitions are our best way of spreading the word rather than Comic Cons and festivals. I don't think we would have enough people for that. Not as yet.
Earlier on, you mentioned the historic manual for each place.
Yeah,
So,
Teikniboken, the book of drawing.
Teikniboken.
Yeah. It's there's actually a book about that, about to be published, a big research study. There's a woman who's been working on this piece for I don't know how many years. And this is I think immensely interesting. That, and it's both a story and picture, and then it's a manual for. So I like the idea that people were doing these how-to-draw manga books way before the Japanese came along. And because there's an art to it in everywhere. Illuminations, they follow certain rules and regulations and the big letters and all. So this is explaining all that. And apparently there are manuals like this in other medieval, there's other medieval manuscripts and traditions, but this is the only one that I've actually seen.
Other questions? We have also the Icelandic exhibition going on at Tónst og Deli, the restaurant here at Oulu Center. So please take a look at the artworks, and thank you so much for your participation.
Thank you.
We are early on our timetable, but let's have a small break now, and when we come back we have one guest from Denmark just outside our schedule, but Sophie Louise Dam from the animation workshop in Denmark will tell briefly about the animation workshop and let's see what we do here. So let's have 15 minutes.
And I brought some Icelandic chocolate for you to play with. And